Hello everybody, welcome back to yet another video. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing Scooby Doo and the Legend of the Vampire. So getting right into it, this was another great nostalgia trip for me. I loved this film growing up. It wasn't one of my favorite Scooby Doo films, but I still do have fond memories of it, like most of these films. And one of the memories that I have of this film was the scene that takes place right after the opening credits. And this is the scene with the Scooby Doo gang on the cruise ship, where we're introduced to them, and they're introduced through the Scooby Doo Where Are You theme song. But whereas most of the other films of this time period used the song but made their own videos or visuals to go along with it, this one takes it a step further and basically is a shot-for-shot recreation of the Scooby Doo Where Are You theme song. This was one of, if not the best, Scooby Doo intros ever, and so I really enjoyed seeing them remake that in this cruise ship setting. However, moving past that, something that I didn't like about this film is basically everything between then and when the gang gets to Vampire Rock. Because it takes them about 20 minutes to get to Vampire Rock, which is unusual for a Scooby-Doo movie because usually, since they're such short run times, I think this one falls in the range of under 80 minutes as usual. So it's kind of weird when 20 minutes into the film, the gang is just arriving at the main location and is just now learning about the mystery. Obviously, we've seen a couple scenes at Vampire Rock, but the gang themselves have not arrived there yet, and so it was a very slow pacing for the first act that I found unusual for Scooby-Doo films, and I didn't really like. And the stuff that they decided to fill this first 20 minutes with, in my opinion, wasn't very interesting. There is that one scene where the shark comes flying out of the ocean and, eats all their stuff and starts chasing the lifeguards that were looking at Daphne. That's a pretty funny scene that I remembered fairly fondly. But besides that, the first 20 minutes basically for me felt like an ad for Australia, because it starts with the game being like, oh, we're gonna go to Australia, blah 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 blah, and then Velma's like, oh, this is something good that Australia has to offer. They're on that bridge, and Velma talks about how great the bridge is, and they see the Sydney Opera House, and Velma talks about how great the Sydney Opera House is, and then they see the beach, and Velma talks about the beach, and then they're like, hey, let's go to Vampire Rock, but also let's have a quick ad for the Outback. And I was like, what is this? Were they sponsored by Australia? I don't understand. It was very odd to me, and while it wasn't it was still somewhat interesting. The montage of them in the Outback's pretty funny, but for the most part, I was not really as entertained in that part as I was the rest of the film. And even after saying all that, I wouldn't have had a huge problem with this if the film was longer. I know I've said this with basically all the Scooby-Doo films. I want a longer runtime because this is, I'm just going to say ballpark 80 minutes. I don't actually know the exact number. I didn't look at it this time. I know I usually do, but I didn't this time. I still think that it should have been longer, maybe bump it up to 100 minutes, and that way you still get 80 minutes of mystery solving in that 20-minute weird intro. I think that would have been a lot better, personally. I'm happy with what we got for the mystery solving stuff. I just wish they would have either expanded that. Actually, I do wish they expanded that. I wish they expanded that by 20 minutes and either added that 20 minutes onto the runtime or just kind of removed some of that Australia Outback ad stuff at the beginning. And after doing this, I think that I probably would have enjoyed this movie much more than I already did. Something that I've defended in a lot of these Scooby-Doo movies up to this time is the fact that the mysteries are fairly easy to solve. And that's actually something I don't feel like I have to do in this film, because it's kind of still a mystery throughout the whole thing as to who these three vampires are, who the Yowie Yahoo, that is a very difficult tongue twister, who the Yowie Yahoo is. And I don't really remember as a kid if I knew who it was. I knew, I obviously knew that the band was coming back, but I was like, I know that there are three characters that we've seen. I don't remember who, and it took me maybe 3/4 of the film's runtime to actually remember, oh, it's these guys, it's the two skinny dudes, and it's the assistant director, or whatever you want to call him. It's those three guys, and I feel like they did a very good job of making it kind of known, but also not making it obvious, because the two skinny dudes, the reason they're at the festival is because of this side guy. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, and he's the only one that knows about the two skinny dudes, so you already have the connection between those three, and that's kind of thrown in there, and it's kind of suspicious where they're like, oh, we're just showing up late, and the other assistant director guy's never around. It's just not as obvious as something like the Cyber Chase, where the Phantom Virus, every other line he says has something to do with baseball, which is the one character trait that that guy was given. And I like that we did have to kind of think about things and how the mystery was a little more complicated while still being simple enough that kids can understand it. However, something that I still don't understand is how they tried to explain it in the end, because the Yowie Yahoo, they tried to explain him as a projection with some special effects, basically, right? And that doesn't make any sense. You have to project onto something. You can't just project into the sky, first of all. And second of all, you know how many of those glass disc things they would have had to do to make that look animated? That's 24 frames a second. And there's no way that they are able to automatically load all those while they're flying around on stage. And don't get me started on the special effects, because where you're getting those fog machines and those fireworks, you're perfectly timing the fireworks to come out where his hands are. And just, there's so many problems, like the wind. Where is the wind coming out of? The wind's not coming in the mountain, and the wind is coming out where the projection is. So that also doesn't make sense. And also, they programmed in a death for him. Like, when Scooby's collar reflects the light back and the Yowie Yahoo dies, they decided to take the time to make a death animation. And they just so happen to have that preloaded up. It just, none of it makes sense. And I know Scooby Doo movies always yada yada over the explanation for how these people do it. And that's fine, but I feel like this one is just so out there and doesn't make any sense at all. I just had to point it out here. That being said, the Yowie Yahoo himself, I felt was a really great villain because he's so big and terrifying with the explosions and the smoke and the wind. He's a very imposing threat for the gang. And I really like the scene where they're up in Vampire Rock and he's blowing them around and he's throwing fireballs at them. I think that was really cool personally. Like, it's a huge imposing monster for the gang to try and stop. And the way they stopped him, albeit not making any sense, was creative and interesting. And overall, like, I like the Yowie Yahoo. I just wish we would have seen more of him in this film, because from what we saw, we didn't see a whole lot of him, and it left me wanting a lot more from him. So the final thing I want to talk about before I start wrapping up this review is the Hex Girls. Because, like I said in my Witch's Ghost review, I love the Hex Girls. They're my favorite recurring Scooby Doo minor character, and I really like seeing them in this film. Their songs aren't as good as they were in Witch's Ghost, however they are still decent. And just anytime we get to see them in Scooby Doo media, it makes for some really interesting stuff. And I said it in that video, I'll say it again in this video. I hope we get to see more of them in the future. But anyways, that's all I have to say here, so I'm going to get into the rating here. I really enjoyed this film, as per usual, with 99% of Scooby Doo films. And it was well made, except for like that 20 minutes and me just nitpicking the whole explanation thing. So I'm going to give it overall an 8.5 out of 10. So yeah, it isn't by any means a bad film. It's not a bad Scooby Doo film, but it has scored lower than a lot of Scooby Doo films recently, because I said it before, this time period is amazing. Like Zombie Island, Alien Invaders, Witch's Ghost, Cyber Chase. Then you have this, and then next up we've got Monster of Mexico, Loch Ness Monster, and Aloha Scooby Doo. Like, there's just, this might be the weakest of like an 8-year, 10-year stretch, but it is still a good Scooby Doo film that I would recommend to anyone that likes Scooby Doo and just animated kids films in general. But anyways, that's all I have to say today, so hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new around here. The next Scooby Doo review will be releasing next Monday at the same time, which is 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that will be Scooby Doo and the Monster of Mexico. So make sure you guys stay tuned if you want to see that. If you want to see more updates on my videos, make sure to check out my Instagram, ntd_films. Thank you guys all for watching, and have a good day.